welcome to the Guns and Ammo Buzz podcast. I'm Eric Poole, editor-in-chief of Guns and Ammo magazine, here with Keith Wood, field editor for Guns and Ammo, who also writes the back page column Spent Cases each month, and Garry James, previous editor-in-chief of Guns and Ammo, and our most senior field editor, if you will. Garry, you go back in Guns and Ammo to 1972, if you've got the pages, but you say you actually started in late 1971?
I started about mid-December of 71.
Mid-December.
I was working at United Press International at the time. I'd gotten out of the Army. I got out of the Army in January and joined UPI, which was a miserable job, terrible, awful working conditions, awful people. And I'm glad UPI is out of business. Now, if we could just get rid of AP, everything would be perfect. But no, it was not a happy job. I'd say about the first 2 or 3 weeks I was there, I started looking for another one. And so I went through the LA Times, and one day I looked, and there was an ad in there for a gun writer. So I applied for the job, and it was interviewed by George Martin, who was the editor at the time, and got the job. It was a wonderful job.
How does the ad look? In 1971, are you opening the newspaper? What does the ad read?
It was maybe this big, a little square, set in the white ads. And I noticed that I was sitting having coffee and breakfast in the morning, getting ready to go to work, and there it was. So I think I called. Matter of fact, I got into UPI. I had to get there real early in the morning. I think I probably called from there and set up the interview and went in a few days later and got the job right on the spot. So,
did you have a lot of competition for that job?
Interestingly, and it was really kind of fun. I went in and wore a coat and tie, and George Martin said, "Well, first of all," he said, "you're the only guy that's coming in that's wearing a tie." Worn a tie. It was in '71. Those things were a lot more formal back then. And then we just started talking about things and talking about guns, and I got out of the Army. I was in the Army for 5 years, and so we talked about things, and George says, "Oh, hell," he said, "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you got the job. Now, let me take you around. I'll introduce you to people, and then you can, you go see HR, and we'll get you going." So I said, "Great." I think the job when I left the Army, I was a captain over 3, and so I was making pretty good money back in the Army back then, especially because I was stationed in the UK, so the money went a long way.
Yeah, we'll have to get back to that.
Yeah, and my job at UPI was $520 a month, and then my job at first starting at Guns and Ammo was $750 a month, and I figured, well, how am I going to spend all that money?
In Los Angeles, no less.
Yeah. My apartment, the apartment was $90 a month. It's just we're going back a few years.
Right. Well, in March 1972 is when I first spotted your name in the masthead as associate editor. And then I noticed your very first article was published later in 1972. I'd love to know, what kind of lead up was it to writing that first article? What kind of research and development did you have to do? That article that I'm referring to is actually right here in my hands. I've got on the Brown Bess.
Yep.
And that is a young Garry James in the picture.
I remember that. That was, as I review it, was a very, very, very high quality replica Brown Bess made in England by a company called Coach Harness.
The long land pattern Brown Bess.
Yeah, it was a lovely piece. And when I lived in the UK, as a matter of fact, I bought one when I was over there, and I brought it back. And
was that the one you reviewed here?
No, actually, I was broke when I got out of the Army, naturally, and so I think I sold it. But then Sandy McNabb, who owned the company, sent me a new one, and so we did a story for him on it. And it was.
I noticed it retailed for $275 then.
Yeah, it was a beautiful gun. Really, really a nice gun.
Now, you also mentioned the Navy Arms version, also $275.
Mm-hmm.
The American-made version of the short land pattern.
It was a short land pattern. Those were made in Italy.
Now, the more affordable one you had here was a Carlisle Colonial Arms short land pattern, foreign made, which sold for $159.95. That's
Yeah.
quite the difference.
I don't remember that one. It might have been Japanese. I'm not sure. That I don't remember.
Fascinating. And then, of course, you compared it to an original India pattern vest dated 1786 and marked Leicestershire Militia.
Leicestershire Militia. I bought that when I was in the UK. And unfortunately, later on, I sold that one. I wish I still had it. That was a really nice gun.
Well, hey, Keith, let me unmute you here and bring you in because, one of the reasons I invited you on this was you're a gun collector yourself.
Mhm.
Can you transport back in 1972 and imagine a younger Garry James?
You never think of yourself as old, really. And until you look in the mirror. So I think I can remember a few bits and pieces of things. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, when you go back and look at those old copies from that era, and you look at the prices of especially surplus guns, Mausers and things like that,
Oh yeah.
I mean, it just makes you want to cry. $15.
Amazing. Buy Webbies for $14 a piece, and Yale Western and things like that.
So, Gary, pretty much from the start, one of the things that readers got to associate you with was period correct uniforms, clothing,
Mhm.
accoutrements, accessories, even your studio photography of the firearms that you were reviewing had correct period pieces. And people try and imagine, wow, Gary must have this massive warehouse available to him just to pull. These period uniforms from. How did you gather all of the accessories to enhance those pages of guns and ammo?
You just kind of accumulate them. Some were borrowed, to be fair. But a lot of the stuff I just accumulated over the years, and to be fair, things were a lot cheaper back then too. And it was much more available. A number of things. I think I started some of my early stories were some of the things I brought back from the UK. When I lived over there, they were giving things away. It was amazing.
Did any of it have to do with your parents and their association with Hollywood? And did that kind of access offer you some unique opportunities?
Oh yeah, well, movies got me into guns. They really did. Because
Tell us a little bit about that.
well, my parents were both actors. They met on a movie, and when I
What
was
were their names?
my dad was Jerry James, and my mother was working under Betty Sealand. My dad had a contract at Paramount. He had a contract at Paramount in 1941 and worked there for a good number of years. He's in lots and lots of Paramount stuff.
What kind of films did they work on?
Everything, you know, you know, whatever my dad was in, it'd be modern day, drawing room comedies, or like he was in Unconquered with Gary Cooper. He had a really good part in that one, and whatever they assigned him to do. Sometimes they loan him out to other studios. But my folks met on a movie, Deanna Durbin film, which that would have probably been with Deanna Durbin. It most likely would have been maybe Columbia. I'm not sure. So he either was not on contract at that point, or he was loaned out at that point. But anyway, I've got a picture of the movie, and I can see them dancing in the movie together before they were even married. It was kind of fun. And I used to play set when I was a little kid. One time I sat on Audie Murphy's lap when I was there. He was in there, but he was, I guess, dating Wanda Hendricks at the time, and so he was there, and I think I was maybe 3 or 4 years old.
What kind of movies interested you then? And how did that influence your interest in firearms?
I always liked historical dramas. Of course, on TV, it was Errol Flynn and the Seahawk and all these really early great 1930s films. Some of the best ones back in for a while there. Alexander Korda, the English producer, his films were superb and beautifully done. He did the Four Feathers, Manic Miracles, all sorts of wonderful things. And for a while, he was kind of broke, so he sold his movies for a short period of time to the television stations. So I watching these English quarter films, Private Life of Henry VIII, Fire Over England, all this sort. So I really got hooked on historical stuff like that. And then they were showing again films, the early Robin Hood films, and we go to theaters and we'd see Ivanhoe or Quo Vadis or whatever. And as soon as we went home, when you were a kid back then, as soon as you went home, you know that's what you played. So if we went, so I remember we saw Ivanhoe, and we made had shields made out of trash can lids, and we made our own spears, and we were jousting one another once another. It's amazing we didn't kill one another. And If it was a Western, we were cowboys and Indians at that time. If it was something else, that's what we were. And so I really, really got hooked on it. My dad was always a gun guy, not an antique collector, but he was into firearms. But the guns immediately started interesting me. And plus, one of the things when I saw the movies, it was kind of fun. I'd see the movie and I'd say, "This is really interesting. I wonder what really happened." So then I go buy a book or something and read about it and find out what really, really happened, and that made it even that much more interesting.
Now, I noticed a lot of times the movie studios didn't necessarily have access to the exact firearms that were being represented
Mhm.
on screen, and they often had to take real firearms of a different nature and then modify them
Mhm.
to give them that appearance.
Yeah,
Everything from Planet of the Apes, right? I
for sure.
remember M1 carbines, that kind of thing. What
Mhm.
are some of your memories about having to adapt firearms for the movies that you enjoy?
Well, I think if it hadn't been for the trapdoor Springfield, Hollywood couldn't have made any movies at all because they turned those things into Civil War muskets. They made them into Arab muskets. They made them into all sorts of different things. So trapdoors were very, very popular. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of the studios had real stuff, and occasionally they did have some good bits and pieces. And if you saw, for instance, Cecil B. DeMille film, DeMille was a big gun collector, and a lot of the guns in the movies were some of his own guns. And you see some wonderful things like in Reap the Wild Wind. Raymond Massey's got a Colt Baby Patterson, and in Unconquered, Gary Cooper's got a swivel breech flintlock, and they're handling the guns properly. And I mean, it's really, the DeMille films, you always know you're going to see a good gun. Matter of fact, I own Northwest Mounted Police. That's about the Mounties back in the 1880s, and they had these Enfield revolvers, and and that's a rare gun. And Stanbridge Arsenal had two Enfield revolvers, and so they used and Stanbridge was on the Paramount lot, and DeMille and whatnot, and my father worked for Paramount. And so they had access to a lot of really, really good stuff. And there was some original stuff, a lot of good original stuff at Stanbridge. And I remember one of the first times I went into Stanbridge, I saw those Enfield revolvers hanging on the wall. I said, "That's really cool." And then later on, I saw them in the movie. And finding that Stanbridge sold out, I managed to buy one of them. So I got that Preston Foster's gun from that film. And interestingly enough, the Enfields are real. It's got Northwest Mounted Police on the grip, so it's a real mounted gun. So occasionally they use really good stuff. But a lot of things, some of the more difficult things, they cobbled up and made them into all sorts of stuff.
Let's get as a kid growing up, were there any kind of movie favorite guns that you really that really made you lust after?
Oh gosh, all of them. You know, I can't imagine. Uh, we were big into cowboy stuff, so that was a big thing. But it would just depend on what movie I'd seen recently. Matter of fact, I'm still that way. Whichever movie I see recently, I want to go out and buy the gun that's in the movie.
Tell us a little bit about your military history, how you were recruited, where you trained, maybe where you served.
Yeah, well, I graduated from college in '66, and I joined because there was a height of Vietnam. I just figured it's what you want to do. If you read Shakespeare's Ages of Man, one of them is the soldier, and so I figured that's just kind of what you do. And I always wanted to be in the military. When I was a kid, we used to play World War II all the time. That's all we did was play. And then the neat thing was a lot of the kids' fathers brought stuff back from the war, so we were actually playing World War II stuff, I mean, with real equipment, real German helmets or real Japanese helmets or all of this sort of thing. So anyway, I just always wanted to be in the military. I joined. I was able to do this college option program. So I signed up for OCS, and they offered Ordnance OCS. They said, "Well, that couldn't be any better." So I went to Ordnance OCS, went to Aberdeen, Maryland. After I went through basic training at AIT, and went to Aberdeen and graduated.
What did you learn in ordnance school?
At Aberdeen, we learned to be motor pool officer. Number one, you never want to be a motor pool officer. That's the most miserable job in the Army. So my friend Sam Frazier and I both signed up for ammunition officer school, and that was ammunition storage. So they sent us to Redstone. We spent a couple, 3, 4 months in Redstone, or maybe a couple months in Redstone, learning all about how to store ammunition. Then and I figured we were going to go to Nam, but we had the option of if we signed up what they called voluntary indefinite, you could pick your duty station. So there were two openings for the UK, and we what couldn't be any better. So Sam and I both applied for the UK, and we both got it. And uh, they sent us to a little ammunition depot in South Wales. And the reason we were there was this was when de Gaulle had left NATO. So we were moving all our theater war reserves from France into England. So we were sitting there receiving all we had, our base was an old ex-Royal Naval propellant factory from World War II. So they were converting a lot of the storage buildings and whatnot to actually store some of these ammunition, and mostly 155s, 105s, some small arms, ammo, hand grenades, this sort of stuff that they were bringing over from France. So as soon as I got there, the major said, "I see you're a journalism major." He said, "Well, I need an adjutant and I need an admin officer. You're it." So I had a whole new trade. And for 3 years, I didn't do any ammunition work whatsoever. I was adjutant deputy commander and administration officer. The base was, we had about 7 officers, about 40 enlisted, and then all the rest were local nationals, mostly English and a few that came over from France. It was the best duty station in the whole world. It was in a Roman village called Kerouet. And um, it was just I when I stayed on the local economy, I went out in the backyard and dug up Roman coins and Roman pottery. We pulled some of the best Roman mosaics in England came out of Kerouac. And there was a Roman wall was still around the village. It was heaven. It was wonderful. And of course, then you could go into the local markets and you could buy all sorts of military and guns and swords and badges and all this kind of stuff. And I was making a lot of money by British standards at that time, so I was able to buy a lot of stuff.
Gary, what was the shooting culture like in England in those days? I assume it was a lot more viable than it is now.
I, Guns were more available back then. I knew a lot of people with more firearms and more, they could have handguns and rifles and shotguns. They had to go through certain machinations, but people had them. And they basically, I think, tightened up a lot since then. But no, I'd go to somebody's house and some guy'd whip out a Luger that he brought back from World War II or whatever it was, and they had to kind of register them with the police, but it seemed to be a lot more free and easy at that time. And of course, antique stuff there was no problem. So there was lots and lots of that floating around. And again, the prices were very, very reasonable.
Was that where your interest in Webleys came from? Was that experience and exposure over there? Were they really popular?
I always kind of liked Brit stuff. Like I say, I told you I got hooked on these Alexander Korda movies, these English films, back when I was back in my, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. So I kind of became kind of a young Anglophile at the time. So I was always kind of interested in British history anyway, although I liked all history. But when I went to the UK, that was made it even better. And so that kind of helped solidify my interest somewhat. Yes.
I tell you what, so you get back to work at Guns and Ammo, 1972. I want to hear if you can describe in like 3 words. I'm going to read you a name of someone on the masthead, and you just tell me what you think of that
Okay.
name. Well, Tom Ciatos.
We could do several shows on Tom Cianos. He was an incredible guy, irreverent, profane, uh, great guy to work with. He was a ex-Marine in World War II, and received a battlefield commission. I mean, here's a typical story of Tom Cianos. So Peterson, for Motor Trend magazine, they had Car of the Year, and they would invite all the different publishers from the different magazines to attend this banquet. So Tom and his wife were sitting at this table, and there was a Japanese, and it was for the first time, I guess, a Japanese card won the Car of the Year. So Ciatos got stuck at a table with a Japanese couple and some other people. And, having served in the South Pacific, he was not particularly, it would have not been his choice of dinner partners. So they're sitting there, and the Japanese chap's trying to be very, very pleasant in the conversation. And He said, "Oh, this is a great honor. It's the first time Japanese car won car of the year." And Seattle said, "Yeah, that's great. That's great." And the Japanese fellow's trying to keep the conversation moving. And he said, "Oh, well, my father, he would be so proud that we've got this great award." And Tom said, "Well, where is he? Is he back in Japan now, or where?" And he said, "No, he was killed on Tarawa." And Tom said, "Oh, I think we shot the son of a bitch."
that, yeah, to see that guy's face.
That's Tom Cianis in a nutshell. Yeah. But a great guy to work for. It's a lot of fun. Probably the best shot I've ever seen. He could pick up any gun and do a superb. He wasn't the best in the world, but best overall shot just for any kind of firearm. He could pick it up and shoot it. He really, really, really.
How about George Martin? What comes to
George was
mind?
great. Yeah, George hired me,
He
and
was the editor.
pardon, he was the editor at the time. Um, George was a really, really good editor. I learned a lot from him. I really did. He taught me how to do captions properly. You know, he had this thing. He said, when you do a caption, he said, I call it moose coming out of water. So there's a picture in then you don't write a caption saying moose coming out of water from the picture of moose coming out of water. You say this is a moose and it's such and such. It's in so and so and this is so big. You say something more about it. So he actually he instructed me how to write captions. Uh, great guy to work for. Lots of fun. Uh, we, the old 5 martini lunches or 3 martini lunches were very common back at Peter's. Back in those. Well, we worked in the Sunset Strip, right off of La Cienega. So I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful location, and so restaurants and places and things to do. You know, it was a lot of fun.
How about E.G. Red Bell?
Red was well, of course, Red later became editor, and then he became editorial director at American Rifleman. I got along with Red beautifully. And Red was Red. You know, and if he was managing editor there, and Red was never there. You know, he would come in once or twice, 2 or 3 or 4 days to put the magazine together, and then he was off doing something else. And George let him do that. They didn't care as long as he got the job done. They didn't care. But Red, when he became editor, I know Phil Spangenberger and I. Red was kind of irascible. He had a great eye for graphics. Uh, but he was kind of irascible. You kind of had to know how to handle it. I got along with the guy great. I never had any problems with him at all. But other people had some issues with him. But we found out one of the best things when you asked Red a question, if you wanted to do something, his answer was automatically, no matter what it was, no. You know. So Phil and I, if there's something we wanted to put in the magazine, some piece of artwork or some story or something on the story, we just go ahead and do it. And if he picked up on it, he said, what's this? What's this? What's this? What's going on here?" And I said, "Well, Red, don't you remember? We talked about that last week." "Well, I don't remember that. I don't remember that." He said, "Well, you said we could do it." And so we went ahead and did it. Of course, he never remembered whether we did or not, because he had a memory, which was a plus. But no, Red was great. Again, he was an acquired taste.
How about Robert Hutton, technical editor?
Bob Hutton, well, he was never on staff. I mean, he owned a Hutton's Rifle Ranch, and uh, I actually I met him before. I think when I was a kid, I used to go to Hutton's Rifle Ranch before I even worked for Guns and Ammo. He was kind of a fussy little guy, not one of my favorite people. He was okay, yeah, yeah, but he was okay. And he was knowledgeable.
We had Jeff Cooper with handguns at that time.
Jeff was a great guy. Jeff was always very knowledgeable, very much the colonel. But he's one of those guys that definitely lived up to his legend. He really was knowledgeable, good shot. Of course, big into 44 mag, 45 autos, that sort of thing.
Now, you also even had certain editors that were specific to types of firearms. You had Michael Reese doing Lugers.
Yeah, again, these were all people that were kind of these were freelancers. Yeah, and I don't remember him. I didn't know him all that well personally because he was off somewhere. I don't remember where he was. We'd edit their stories and whatnot, and
How about John Wooters, hunting editor?
John was a great guy. Yeah, really, really good chap. Yeah, very, very. Yeah, always enjoyed John. Easy to work with, good copy, knowledgeable.
Elmer? How about Elmer Keith?
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. That's where I was going.
Elmer was Elmer. Yeah, I mean, he was so funny. When you were when you were when you started there, one of your training things is a new editor was they give you Elmer. Well, Elmer wrote kind of stream of consciousness, and it was gunnel to gunnel and misspelled and words and things and stuff, and you'd sit there and it was a nightmare sorting out his stories. It was incredible trying to make them putting them into English, and of course and as soon as you do this, it would appear. And next thing you know, he'd call George Martin. He said, they're ruining my stories. They're taking out all my color. And George would call me. Whatever's going on, that's on the I said, George, I said, you wouldn't understand it, darn thing. He said, I know, but we have to kind of humor him. So call him up and do it. But no, he was a great little guy. Yeah. I, he was big into Chivas Regal. He used to call it Chivas. I remember when we were out partying. And knowledgeable, affable when you were editing his stories. Fun to be with. I liked him. Yeah.
How about P.O. Ackley?
I didn't know him. Again, I edited his column, and of course, he originally started the Gunsmith column, which was where the Gunroom column came from. Because originally, when he quit, I'm trying to remember who took over. There was another chap that took over for a while, and then I took it over. But we decided, from a liability standpoint, it wasn't a good idea to start telling people how to do gunsmithing. So we decided to change the tenor column. Uh, so people write in with gunsmithing questions, and our attorneys got involved in this one. So we changed it to the gun room, where we made it a what's it column, and that's what it was, and so which it still is.
So my wheels are turning. It's like it's crazy to think that the lawyers were getting involved even back then. It's like some things haven't changed, and they certainly haven't gotten better.
Yeah, it was the probably the best job in the whole world. It was just wonderful. I couldn't wait to get into the office in the morning, and we would always the hours were when you get towards shipping time, and where you're working. Sometimes you'd be sleeping in the hallway, working overnight. And of course we had to be at the office at that time. There was no working off site. You had to be there. But it was and I lived out in the valley, and the drive was not a pleasant drive because it was on Sunset Boulevard, and every year it got worse and worse. But it was still, it was worth it. It was just great. And there's so many stories. One of my favorite stories. We had a managing editor, and what we did back then, we used to put the magazines were on big flats, and everything was all pasted down, and we would send these flats along with the artwork and the photos. We send them to the printers, and they'd shoot pictures of them, and do what they had to do, and then they print the magazine. And that was back in Carroll Stream, Illinois. We'd have to ship the stuff from Los Angeles back to Carroll Stream, and so we were working late one night, and Ken was our editor, and Ken Faust, and he was placing the ads in the back of the magazine, because the ads were always coming in at the last minute. You're having to remake the magazine because they never turned an ad down. So sometimes at the last minute, a big ad would come in, you have to remake the whole back of the magazine, and that's where most of the ads, the back and the front, is where the ads were. So we were working late one night, and we had to ship the next morning early, but we all went home, and Ken uh, had the whole back of the magazine, and he put it on, just set it on top of the trash can when he went home. So we'd come back in the morning, we'd put it all together and send it out. Well, the cleaning crew came, and so they threw away half of the magazine, and we had to ship the next morning. Now, fortunately, it wasn't the main part where we had all the good artwork and the stories and whatnot. It was a lot of the jump stuff and the ads and whatnot, but there was still we had to do. So the bottom line, needless to say, we didn't ship that morning, but we were working 24/7 to try to recreate. First of all, we were jumping in the dumpster looking for the those flats. We were calling the trash company. We were doing everything we could do to try to reconstruct it. No good. So we had to redo everything. And back then, this was not an easy thing because it all had to be hand pasted down. And we had waxers and paste all the copy down, and then you'd have to resize the photos. A lot of the photos we didn't have because they were thrown out because they were actual physical photographs that we sent. So they were gone. So we had to kind of reconstruct those or try to find something else to fit into place and rewrite the captions and do the whole thing. It was an interesting experience. It was so awful we couldn't even get. It was such an awful happenstance that we couldn't even get mad at Ken about it. It just kind of happened.
Gary, what was the process back then, editorial wise? If you wanted to review a certain gun, I mean, things have obviously changed a lot in the years since. You're not known for doing the newest gun on the block. A lot more historical things, collectible things. Like,
Right.
what was it like back then to pitch a project and make it happen?
It was harder back then. We did do Arnold Chernoff used to do a collector's thing for us for a while. He was a big gun dealer. When I say big, he weighed like about 500 pounds. I'm not joking. And there's stories about Arnold Chernoff I can tell you too, but that's for another time. But a lot of course, a lot of the time, we had a huge ad sales department. Everything was so much larger. I mean, our I don't know what the staff is on the magazine now, but back then, just to put the magazine out, we probably had 11 or 12 people. This, you know, two or three, couple, three associate editors, the editor, the managing editor, ads, the two copy editor, couple of art directors. So we had a big staff back then, and we had a big advertising staff. So basically, it was they were trying to pitch an ad to some manufacturer. That's where the modern gun ads would mostly, they would come from. Trying to pitch an ad on a gun that they were not realizing any ad revenue from was more difficult because it was taking up space. And but fortunately, we had enough of a following. We were able to, between Phil Spangenberger and I, we were able to talk them into it. And then finally it became more of a popular feature, and we ended up getting lots of good responses on it. So they were a little more liberal with us and let us do more of that kind of thing. We used to set up some elaborate shots, especially Phil, with cowboys and horses and all sorts of things. It was amazing what they would let us do back then.
Yeah, and Phil Spangelberger, he just passed away recently.
Yeah,
Very sad to hear that.
oldest friend. He and I met when I think I was probably about 16 or so, and he was about 20.
I don't know if I've ever seen a picture of him where he wasn't dressed up in a Western period garb.
That was his thing. He was big into that. But yeah, he looked that kind of stuff. Absolutely. Yeah, Phil. Actually, I got Phil his job there because Phil and I had met before. We belonged to the Civil War group in California back in the '60s. Then he went in the army, and then I went to college, and then I went in the army and got out, and we met at a gun show, and so we became friends again and picked up where we left off. He was working for McKesson at that time, delivering drugs. So they were looking for another editor at Guns and Ammo, and I said, "Well, heck, Phil's a literate guy. He's never done any writing or whatnot, but I think he could probably do the job." So I introduced him to, I think it was George Martin hired him, and he got the job, and the rest is history, as they say. He did a great job for us. Did a great job. He was really a good chap.
Gary, when you became the editor in the 90s, I believe it was about 1994, 1995.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yes. And you were the editor all the way through about 2001, I think it was.
Yeah, it was a few years. Yeah, so I basically I got cancer in 2000, and so that kind of knocked me out a little bit. And so I figured it was time to kind of step down. You kind of reevaluate your life, and so needless to say, it's gone now. Thank God.
As editor, did you have any particular goals or hopes and dreams that you wanted to accomplish with the magazine, or just steward it forward?
I wanted to make the readers happy. I wanted to make an entertaining publication, and the big thing is that you have to realize we're in the entertainment business. Um, and you're competing. At least at that time, we were competing with motion pictures and television. You're looking for those same dollars. It may be a little different now because of internet and all this sort of thing. But I know we wanted to make the magazine as entertaining and as reader friendly as we possibly could. And you'll notice back then we had a lot of pages to play with. We were selling lots and lots of ads. It was a very profitable magazine.
We're also the last editor under the Petersen era.
Right.
Uh, Mr. Robert Petersen sold Peterson's Publishing,
Right.
and what was that era like in reflection?
He was the greatest guy in the world, you know. And if I can tell a story, I'll bleep out one word. But when I first would, Pete was, uh, he had his office on the 11th floor in our Sunset building. He owned the building. And, I'd see him, and we were his favorite magazine. He would go over that magazine with a fine tooth comb, and he'd come down and he'd edit it and he'd do things and so you couldn't get away with much with him. And you'd see him going up in the elevator, and it was like seeing God. You'd see him, morning, Mr. Peterson, morning, morning, and up he'd go. And so, about 3 or 4 months after I first started there, I get a call from his secretary and Gigi, and she said, "Mr. Peterson would like to see you in his office." And I figured, "Oh man, oh dear, what have I done?" He saw something. I must have written something in the magazine. Oh, this is not good. So, because he never called me before, and so Mr. Peters will see you. So I went into his office, and he says, "Gary, you're supposed to know something about English guns. What do you think about this gun?" And so he had this beautiful four-barreled Lancaster rifle, which is now in the National Firearms Museum. A very, very rare gun. Mostly Lancaster pistols. Mostly Lancasters were pistols, and basically the rifling was an oval bore rifling. It was very interesting. It worked quite well. But to make a long story short, this is a real rare gun, and it was expensive. Somebody was trying to sell it to him. He said, "Well, the guy wants to sell this gun to me," and I forget what the price was. I think let's pull a figure out of the hat. It may have been $8,000 or $9,000, and this is back in the '70s. It was more than I was making in a year, and so I saw the gun. I said, "Listen, boy, this is beautiful. But I can't tell a guy to spend that much money on a gun." And I said, "Well, Mr. Peterson, I said, it's a really rare gun." I said, "But uh, this is really it's a lot of money. It's kind of your decision." He said, "You're supposed to be the effing expert. Should I buy it or shouldn't I?" And I said, "Buy it." He said, "Fine." So I realized at that point he didn't just want a yes man. He wanted to really know what you thought, you know. And but had many great experiences with him. One of my favorites was we used to have once every couple of months we'd have a Peterson Day at the ranch. He had a ranch out in Santa Clarita area or Santa excuse me, Lake Elizabeth area, excuse me. And it was a great ranch, and he had range and a ranch house, and the whole staff would go out. The secretaries and the art directors and everybody go out shooting. And so I took some guns out. So I had some Enfields I was shooting, and I bought some, and I had all sorts of 303 ammo that I had. And so I'm teaching the secretaries how to shoot the Enfields, and we're shooting the guns, and we're firing off, and bam, 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 and doing this stuff. Pete's sitting over at the bench and shooting one of his double rifles. And he calls and he says, "Gary, come over here." I said, what are you shooting over there?" I said, "Well, that's an Enfield carbine and such and such." And he said, "Where's all that ammo coming from?" I said, "It's mine." He said, "Well, at the rate that I go on through it, you must be richer than I am." I said, "Oh, no, Mr. Peterson, they're enjoying it. Don't worry about it." He said, "No problem." He said, "They're having a good time with it." And so he goes back to shooting. I get back to the office the next day. I get a call from Gigi, the secretary, and she said, "Mr. Peterson wants to know how much that ammo cost yesterday." And I said, "No." I said, "The girl, they were enjoying." He said, "No, he doesn't think you should have to spend your money on that. He wants to know how much it was." But I mean, it's amazing he remembered that. And yeah, and I came up with a figure, and then he paid for the ammo. But he was just a wonderful guy to work
I'm going to ask one question if about Peterson, then we can move on to something else I've got at the end of this.
with. Sure.
Uh, I understand that he was largely also responsible for helping bring the Olympics to Los Angeles in 1984. Can you tell us a little bit about those circumstances? And
He was a shooting commissioner, so he was in charge of the shooting. I was, interestingly enough, I was in England at the time, the Olympics at that time, so I wasn't that involved with it. Phil Spangenberger put on a Wild West show, you know, at the Olympics. I remember that, and it was one of his most cherished memories. He was very proud of being shooting commissioner.
Well, and I think a range came out of that that still exists, uh,
Mm-hmm.
just north of LA today. So that's pretty special.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the gun room column
Right.
is basically everything that you've discussed about yourself. There's Hollywood hardware today.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost a reflection of your interest in history.
Well,
And
people love guns and movies.
that's right.
Mhm.
There's the auction block, and you
Mhm.
keep up to speed with some of the fun auctions that are
Yeah,
happening
I
and
worked for
really bring
Sotheby's.
us astounding values of firearms you might
Mhm.
not expect.
Well, I was in charge of the Arms and Armor department at Sotheby's for a couple of years in Los Angeles, and so I kind of got into the business that way. Uh, to be honest with you, I wasn't comfortable in the job. Things went on in the auction business that I wasn't comfortable with, so I went back to publishing, and I was much happier with. No, go
And
ahead.
you've also got the book review section. Uh,
Mhm. Right.
and I imagine in answering reader questions every month about what's this firearm, how much it's worth for insurance purposes,
Mhm.
um, you've
Yeah.
got to have one heck of a resource library. Is that true?
We tried to figure it when we moved. Now, a lot of the books aren't gun books, but a lot of them, I'd say most of them are, or they're history books. I don't know, somewhere between 8 and 10,000 books.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the tonnage of what that.
It was horrible. I screwed my back up in the last move, just moving books.
Gary, you have like the Dewey Decimal System, or how are those organized?
I when I moved here, I used to have them all organized when I was in Montana, and just moving here, it was just such a nightmare. I just put them on the shelves, and I've slowly been kind of moving them, categorizing them, but I just kind of remember where they are.
Well, at the front of every issue of Guns and Ammo magazine, we have Gun Room. And
Mhm.
in Gun Room, the reader asks a short question. We give a little interesting uh, comment and reply, and you generally sum it up with a value. So I'm not going to hold you to it, but
Oh, you have to realize these values. Some things I know off the top of my head. Sometimes I and to do for justice to the reader, I have people. I have experts that are Luger experts. I've got people that are into double rifles and this sort of thing. Things that I'm not that sharp on, and I can call these people, or I can check on auction figures, and that's where I get a lot of my figures. So, at the risk of disillusioning the readers, I don't pull these things full blown out of my head. I do research on them to find the actual prices because they right now the market is so odd. Things that were hot one time are cold now, and vice versa. It's kind of hard to keep track of prices.
well, I've got a few firearms. I'd love to hear both Keith's estimation
Oh
and
dear.
Gary, if you can offer me a little bit about what comes off the top of your head regarding its
Mm.
history and potential value. I'll answer questions you have about it, considering condition or markings, anything you like. And we'll just have some fun with it. And we'll wrap up this podcast from that. And the
Okay.
first gun I'm going to pull out, you can probably guess the gun just by.
That's a Type 14 Nambu holster, with I'm sure has a Nambu in it, right?
Yep. And this is a bring back holster.
It looks like a nice one. Yeah.
On
Mhm.
the inside, it's written, it looks like in pencil, Okayama, Japan, spelled O K A Y A M A.
Hmm.
It's dated December 3rd, 1945. And this person had drawn his shoulder patch in here with New Guinea, Leyte, looks
Cool.
like Manoa,
Mhm.
Mondadao, and Japan, all written in here. There's
That's
another
neat.
magazine in
Yeah.
there as well. But here's the pistol, and we've
Looks
got
like a nice clean gun.
showing the date.
Mhm.
Yep, it's in. I would probably rate this at about say 80% condition. It's in
Mhm.
got most of its bluing intact. There's a little bit of scratching here where the safety lever has been
Yeah,
rotated.
that's pretty normal. Yeah.
Pretty normal. Yep.
Yeah. It's not uncommon.
But otherwise, a good looking pistol. Can you tell us a little bit about the pistol and what you might rate it?
It looks like a lovely gun. It was kind of the most popular, Japanese gun, handgun during World War II. They had lots of others, but I forget when the Type 14 came in. It came in like in the 1920s. If I'm not mistaken. It came in the 20s. Again, it's not one area of my main area of expertise is mostly 18th, 19th, 17th century stuff, but World War II stuff as well. I do enjoy it. There's lots of variations in the gun. It was like a favorite war trophy. Lugers, Lugers and Nambus were really, really popular. Luger was the number one war trophy, but Nambus were popular too. Actually, Japanese skulls were real popular war trophies for a while. Yeah, and they used to send those back, but finally the government said, Let's not do this anymore." Yeah,
Family member of mine had 2 skulls. He hid them in gas masks and brought 'em back.
that was a real popular, real, and sometimes you see them with painted things on them and all sorts of stuff.
I'm going to pitch this to Keith now, and then Gary, you can correct him a little bit. Keith,
Well,
what
I'll
would
be
you
honest,
give at a gun show for something like that?
I know nothing about Nambus. Have never fired one, never had an interest in them, always kinda thought they were funny looking guns.
They shoot pretty good.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't that sort of the design basis for the Ruger?
Yeah, the Ruger Standard pistol with Bill Ruger.
Possibly, I don't know.
Eric, I'll give you $200 for it. That's my,
Yeah, again, I've lost track on a lot of these World War II stuff. All of a sudden, it's going crazy. For a while, you couldn't give it away, and now it's going nuts. But I mean, that holster rig and it looks like a fairly decent gun, and I can't tell if there's any other accessories and stuff with it. The markings on the holster, they certainly add interest to it, if not that much more value. So I mean, gun's got to be worth a couple of grand. I'd say or thereabouts.
No kidding. Well, I'm going to keep it. No problem. A couple of grand. That's a pretty nice figure.
Yeah, don't hold me to that because I'm ask me about some of the earlier stuff, and I'm a little better on it.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I've just got what I've got in hand here. So let's just try and have fun with it, and I'm not going to hold anything to you if you're wrong. And I'm sure we'll get some comments. I'd love to hear people's comments in the comments section of this podcast, and maybe they can offer their own idea of what something's worth. But my next pistol up, I'm going to stay with World War II. I'm sorry, Gary, but another bring back.
Yep. Good old P08 Luger. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and
this one is marked on the toggle S42.
S42. That's a fairly common gun. Is it
And
dated?
all the numbers match, including the last 2 digits on the side plate and on the back of the toggle. And the magazine, of course, does not match.
Probably doesn't match. Yeah.
It's an honest magazine with proof marks and that sort of thing. How are Lugers doing in the market these days?
I mean, I guess it's 2,200, 2,300, 2,400 maybe. I can't see the condition and whatnot on it.
Right. And I'm going to actually knock this one down a little bit. There's some scarring on the grips, and
Yeah.
you've got your little scratching, but it's honest wear. There's nothing.
Yeah, it looks like a decent piece. Absolutely. The market on Lugers it was really high and it's gone down, and so I kind of, to be honest with you, lost track of the numbers on them right now.
And this is a pretty standard configuration too. I mean, it's not anything unusual in artillery
That's
model.
the most common version. Yeah.
Right. Straw parts.
To me, what's interesting about that gun, looking at the comparison of those 2 guns,
Yeah.
the amount of manufacturing effort that went into creating the Luger, all those machine parts. I mean, that is a work of art. Overly complicated, probably tremendously expensive to make.
So typically German. Yeah.
Right. So German. Whereas that, very efficient Japanese design, super simple, probably very cheap to make, could make a ton of them. I can, totally appreciate the Luger, although how just impractical it must have been to make a gun that complicated.
Well, the Germans even, they came up with the P38, which is a far superior pistol.
All right, guys. My next one was a bit of an advancement for firearms design when it came out, and it got great coverage in early pages of Guns and Ammo. And you might simply recognize it by the stock if I show nothing else.
It looks like a 1966.
That is, it's a 66. Doesn't have a magazine, so it's fed at the rear.
That's a real one because there were some later ones. Those were great guns. When I was going through um, in college, I sold sporting goods, and that's when the nylon 66 was kind of popular at that time. And I remember, the manager of our sporting goods department. I worked at a company called a place called Whitefront. It was a discount house, and as a sales pitch, he'd take the gun and bash it on the counter. And say, look, no scratch. You can't hurt. You can't think. It was a great gun. You never want to take one apart.
The stock was developed in part with DuPont,
Right.
and and that's kind of how they came up with that 66 number on there. It wasn't for the year of manufacture or anything like that. And they made these stocks in a variety of colors too, and often associated them with Indian tribes,
Yeah.
Native American tribes. You had the Seneca green, you've got
Yeah.
the Mohawk brown,
Brown. Yeah.
Apache black,
Yeah.
and I visited Remington a few times through the years, and in their vault they had some unusual colors. They had a yellow bee, they had a white one,
Interesting. Wow.
and evidently they were guaranteed for life. So if your stock had cracked or broken, you could have requested a replacement stock, and they had millions of stocks in a vault. And unfortunately, when Remington went out of business just a number of years ago, they still had tons of stocks that were unclaimed in their warranty department that were ultimately destroyed and forgotten. So unfortunately, I wish I could have gotten one or two of those stocks, but they really held up. And
It's a great little rifle. They just keep going and keep going and keep going.
And
Don't take them apart.
Yeah, a little secret to it is it's held, this receiver part, which is serialized, serialized on this side, is actually just a cover plate. You don't really need this metal folded piece of steel to shoot the rifle. You remove that, and you could still functionally use it because all the action is contained on the polymer part. So it's an interesting ATF conundrum back in the day.
And later on, they came out with bolt action versions of the thing and stuff too, as I remember.
Yes, and a magazine fed version, the model 77 Mohawk.
Yeah.
All right, moving on quick. I spent way too long on that. By the way, I'll say about it. Those have gone up in price.
Oh, I know, they're crazy.
They are crazy now. They used to be, available at your local hardware store, for very affordable gun.
Right. Well, somebody, as I remember, then somebody else took over manufacturing them. I don't remember what the company was, but
I understand they made them until the tooling wore out. So plenty of them on the market, but now people, just maybe 10, 15 years ago, they're $400. Good luck finding one for $400 these days.
Good ones are hard to find and they're expensive. Yeah.
Next.
Oh dear. I'm not a big Smith & Wesson expert.
That's a 1950s era box right here.
My friend Jim Sapika and Rick Nahas, who wrote the book on Smith & Wesson, they're the guys I talked to on Smith & Wesson.
All right, so this one is a model 19-3, and consider the value with it in the box.
Having a clue.
Okay. It is got the packaging here. It's virtually, I'm going to say it. This is like as much of a 99% gun as one.
Brand new.
Beautiful.
Almost brand new from the 1950s.
In my column, I call Rick and I say, Rick, I got a brand new, whatever it is. What do they sell for? And he tell me right to the dollar.
So Rick would be your answer. I'm going to just share with you what's in the box with it.
Got all the tools. That's a lovely gun.
Great screwdriver tool. And of course, we've got the parts list and instructions with it. Very familiar. I just love the materials that would come with these old.
Oh yeah.
You've got the warranty card. And a little brochure about ammunition for it. So really good piece. Keith, would you hazard a guess?
Yeah.
What does the 19-3 bring?
The Smith & Wesson market seems to be really tightly focused. Like certain guns go crazy. The Register Magnums, even though they're not super rare, command giant prices. Just from what I've seen at auctions and stuff, I would guess that gun's in the 2,000 to 2,500 range, and it should be way higher. But
Yeah.
that's just kind of what the market seems to want to bear right now.
Yeah, you take a look at the Colts, Webleys, Smith and Wesson. They were made between the wars. Uh, Absolutely magnificent. You don't get much better. You really don't. Just superb, superb guns. I've, I've always wanted it. I'd like to have a registered 357, but those are going for crazy prices now. And for a while there, they were reasonable. And then all of a sudden, boom! Just like these snake guns, they just went crazy. Of course, the registered 357s are rare. The snake guns, a lot of them aren't that rare. It's just I think it's like I'm wondering whether it's kind of like the old 17th century Dutch tulip bulb, um, but bust where the prices are going up and up and up, and all of a sudden there's going to be a reckoning. We'll see.
One last question for you here. For someone who's new to the gun collecting hobby,
Mhm.
what kind of guns should they be looking for to be sure that they don't maybe lose money in the future on their investment? What are some safe rules to follow?
People have always asked me, what should I, what's going to go up in value? What's going to collect? What should I collect? If I knew that, I said I wouldn't be in the business. I'd be in the gun business, selling guns. It's a difficult thing uh, to predict. Like right now, all of a sudden, for some reason, World War II stuff has just went crazy. Uh, Garans are going for silly money now, and Johnson. Good lord! A few years ago, you could buy a Johnson for a couple $1,000s, and now they're starting at 5 and 6 and 7, 8, 9. I mean, crazy prices on these things.
I wish I could find them more often. I rarely see one come up for sale. One of those 1941 Johnsons. Huh.
Yeah, I sold one to my friend Phil Schreier a few years ago. He said, I paid too much money for that. Well, now I could probably get $6,000 to $7,000 for it. And I said, I'd be more than pleased to give you what I sold it to, what I sold it to you for originally.
Keith, I don't believe you're in. Uh, you're not the type of guy who actually flips guns. You probably keep everything you purchase. But Keith, what is the most special gun you have in your collection?
Oh, boy, that's a tough question. It just depends on my mood at the particular time. I don't know. What's my favorite gun? Gosh, it's probably pretty esoteric stuff. I've got a really nice 5.77 Howdy pistol I really like. I've got some 3 or 4 Baker rifles. I'm really into those, that sort of thing. I collect Crimean war guns. I really like those. I just say a little esoteric. I've got a couple of matchlock and wheel locks that I like. Um, it just depends on my mood any particular day. It really.
Gary, is there a gun that's eluded you that you've always wanted that you've never gotten your hands on?
I'd love to have a knock volley gun, but there's knock volley gun. They're so darn expensive now. The last one I just had one recently offered to me for I think it was $35,000. I said, no, I think I'll pass on that. Thank you very much. I would like. I've got a replica one that I shoot. It's a French Napoleonic. I mean, excuse me, British Napoleonic Navy uh, gun that has 7 barrels. And they all go off at once, and it's really, really, really cool. As a matter of fact, if you saw the movie The Alamo, Richard Widmark is carrying a knock volley gun. And Petersen owned that gun, and it's now in the National Firearms Museum.
Gary, I've got one last question for you. What, over the years let's talk about the collectible guns, the guns you're known for, nothing new. Um, what percentage of those guns have been out of your personal collection versus guns that you've acquired just for the article?
I'd say probably 80 to 90% came from my collection.
Wow.
Well, I don't like, because I like to shoot them all.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit leery about taking somebody's valuable antique and taking it out and shooting it in case something happens. So I'm willing to go ahead and take the chance with my own stuff. If anything happened, I just feel terrible. So I'm more comfortable using my own stuff.
Eric, you got anything else?
That's it. Let's save the rest for a future podcast.
But we can bore the people further.
Well, legendary career, a lot of awesome history. If we could, I'm sure what's in your head rivals what's in those thousands of books you own. So we could tap into just a piece of that.
I make a lot of stuff up too. You have to realize it.
But nobody can call you on it. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah,
There's probably
nobody-
nobody that knows any better than you. So
yeah, it's so esoteric, nobody knows.
right. Thank you so
All
much
right,
for
well-
joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, great talking to both of you. Really had a great time.
All right. Thanks, Gary.